The moment Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the turf at that elite Miami facility, there was an electricity in the air that even the most seasoned NFL scouts couldn't ignore. This wasn't your average quarterback workout. This wasn't a lightly scripted throwing session for social media clips or a padded pro day designed to impress GMs. No, this was the real deal. An NFL-style private session that pushed Sanders to his absolute limit, mentally, physically, and emotionally. The facility itself set the tone, used by legends like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers in their off-season regimens. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. It carried a certain reverence, a kind of unspoken pressure that demanded excellence. And Sanders brought it. From the first snap, you could see it in the way he moved, in the calm precision of his footwork, and in the confidence radiating from every motion. He wasn't there to prove he belonged. He was there to demonstrate he'd already arrived. What made the session extraordinary wasn't just Shedeur's arm strength, though that certainly stunned everyone present. It was the sheer complexity of what he was being asked to do. The drills were designed not by personal trainers, but by former NFL defensive coordinators, men who had game planned against the best quarterbacks in the league. They weren't throwing softballs. They were disguising coverages, rotating safeties, simulating disguised blitzes, everything they could think of to rattle a young quarterback. It didn't work. Sanders stood in the pocket like he had been doing this for years. He didn't just read the defense. He anticipated it. He manipulated it. He would shift protections at the line, make audibles that shocked even offensive coaches watching, and then deliver throws with such immaculate timing and velocity that it left mouths hanging open. His mechanics were flawless. His vision was sharp. And more than anything, he made it look easy. There was one moment in particular that stood out. A third down simulation with a collapsing pocket, timed rushers off both edges, and tight coverage downfield. Shedeur didn't panic. He stepped up, kept his shoulders square, and fired a deep-out route, on time, on target, and perfectly placed between two defenders. The room fell silent, not because it was unexpected, but because it was undeniable. You don't teach that. You either have it or you don't. The reaction from the defenders participating in the drill said even more than the coaches. These were former NFL players, not just random guys in pads. Men who had intercepted passes from Hall of Famers. And yet, after session of trying to confuse, trap, or collapse Sanders, they couldn't help but shake their heads in disbelief. A few even walked over to him after certain throws, dapped him up, and offered praise. Not because they were obligated to, but because they knew they just witnessed something rare. That's the word that kept coming up in the post-workout conversations. Rare decision-making, rare leadership, rare arm talent, but maybe most importantly, rare composure. Sanders never looked rattled. He never looked overwhelmed. Every challenge seemed to sharpen him, to focus him more. When a play broke down, he didn't just scramble. He reset the play in real time, processing faster than most rookies can on film study. The scouts began to lean forward in their seats. The coaches started whispering. Phones lit up with messages. And suddenly, a fifth-round label started to look like the mistake of the year. After the workout, word spread fast. Some scouts called it the best quarterback session they had ever attended. A few even admitted they had to go back and rewatch his college film. Not to reevaluate, but to understand how they missed what was so clearly in front of them now. Sanders hadn't just elevated his stock. He had rewritten his narrative. The entire experience also spoke volumes about his preparation. This wasn't a quarterback leaning on natural ability alone. You could see the work behind every movement. The hundreds of hours spent breaking down film, studying protections, refining footwork, mastering playbooks. He had internalized the grind in a way few young quarterbacks ever do. And that's why this workout wasn't just a flash in the pan. It was a culmination of years of development, sharpened under the spotlight of expectation and pressure. Shedeur's poise extended beyond the drills. During breaks, he didn't retreat into himself or look to escape the intensity. He walked over to defensive players, engaged them in conversations about coverage decisions, asked questions, and offered perspective That interaction wasn't performative. It was insightful. It showed he was still learning, still humble, still focused on being the best student of the game in the room. That kind of curiosity isn't just refreshing, it's dangerous. Because when elite talent meets a relentless desire to improve, the ceiling disappears. And yet, despite the dazzling performance, the workout also raised a question that always haunts players who dominate in controlled settings. Will it translate? Can Shedeur take this perfection and precision into live NFL games? When the defenders aren't pulling up and hits are real and the stadium is roaring with 80,000 people begging for your collapse? That's the challenge every quarterback must face. But if anything, this workout suggests he's more ready for it than anyone gave him credit for. He didn't just show physical tools. He showed leadership. He showed accountability. He showed maturity. Teams are already scrambling. The Giants, the Raiders, and even a few playoff contenders reportedly sent follow-up requests to his camp for private meetings or second-look evaluations. You could feel the urgency, the sense of regret from franchises that didn't take him more seriously before. And for good reason. Quarterbacks like this don't come around often. When they do, you can't afford to blink. The fact that Shedeur is the son of Deion Sanders only adds another layer to this story. There's an assumption with legacy players that they ride reputation more than results. But anyone who watched that workout knows that couldn't be further from the truth. Deion might have opened doors, but Shedeur walked through them with a command that only true quarterbacks possess. His preparation, his attention to detail, his mental approach, those things don't come from privilege. They come from sacrifice. There's also a deeper narrative beginning to take shape here. This isn't just about one player. It's about how NFL teams evaluate talent, about how certain schools, certain systems, and certain media perceptions can blind decision-makers. Sanders is the kind of player who challenges the formula. He doesn't fit into neat categories. He isn't just a pocket passer, or just a dual-threat QB, or just a coach's son. He's all of it, and he's more. The workout concluded with a final challenge, a scripted drive simulation, 90 seconds on the clock, no timeouts, needing a touchdown. The coaches ratcheted up the complexity. The defense blitzed on nearly every down. And still, Sanders dissected them with icy precision. His final throw? A 40-yard strike off his back foot, over the outstretched hands of two defenders, into the arms of a streaking receiver just before the goal line. Game over. No celebration. No showboating. Just a quiet nod to his trainer. A quick word with the receivers, and then a towel over the shoulder as he headed to the sideline. Business finished. If there was ever any doubt about whether Shedeur Sanders had it, that workout erased it. What stood out most about Shedeur Sanders' historic workout in Miami wasn't just the impressive display of arm strength or even the NFL-level play sequencing. It was a complete control he exercised over every aspect of the session. There was a quiet command in his presence, something only true field generals possess. Even among a crowd of former professionals and evaluators, Shedeur didn't appear as a participant trying to earn his spot. He looked like a player who had already claimed it and was now showing others why they had missed it. From the very beginning of the workout, it was clear this wasn't going to be business as usual. The setup was more reminiscent of a mini NFL camp than a pre-draft showcase. Former linebackers crouched across from Shedeur. Disguised blitzes came from multiple angles, and routes were changed mid-drill based on simulated pre-snap coverage reads. It was all designed to see if Shedeur could adjust on the fly, not just throw into space, but think like a true pro quarterback in real time. And over the course of several hours, he did it with such consistency that even the harshest critics present began to reassess their scouting reports. It wasn't just what he did, it was how fast he did it. The tempo of the workout was deliberately sped up to mimic the quick turnarounds of NFL drives, where quarterbacks have to reset mentally and physically in seconds. Coaches watching the drills noted his sharp dropbacks, how fluidly he adjusted to pressure, and his ability to shift the pocket subtly to buy extra time while keeping his eyes downfield. These weren't raw traits. They were polished, practiced, mature. One of the moments that truly turned heads came during a simulated 3rd and 12 scenario. The defense, comprised of ex-pros who had seen every trick in the book, showed blitz then dropped back into a deceptive Tampa 2 look. Most college quarterbacks would have either taken a sack or forced a check down. But Sanders saw it instantly, recognized the opening in the seam behind the linebackers, and delivered a strike before the safety could even react. It was a kind of anticipatory throw that separates NFL starters from backups, and it was delivered with pinpoint velocity and touch. Observers began murmuring among themselves. Some had watched Sanders in college and liked what they saw, but few had expected this level of poise in such a high-pressure, unscripted setting. Even scouts who had previously tagged him as needs development were now scribbling new notes and looking at one another with raised eyebrows. A few took phone calls. One even muttered under his breath, "We messed this up." By the time the red zone drills rolled around, Shedeur wasn't just participating. He was dictating. He began calling his own protections, signaling hot routes, and even requesting coverage shifts to test himself further. The coaches running the drills tried to throw new variables at him. Delayed blitzes, disguised double coverage, and even unexpected route miscommunications. Still, he adjusted. He made the corrections. He ran the next play better. But it wasn't perfection alone that left the most lasting impression. It was the way he handled imperfection. On one rep, Shedeur overthrew a fade route to the corner of the end zone by just a foot. The ball landed out of bounds, and the receiver gave him a look. Sanders jogged over, apologized, and explained his read. "I thought he was breaking flatter. My bad. I'll hit you next time." Then he turned to the coach and asked for the same play again, this time adjusting the angle. The result? A picture-perfect touchdown throw that even the defenders watching had to clap for. That moment summed up Shedeur's entire approach. There was no panic, no ego, just a quiet, relentless pursuit of getting better. And when you put that mindset into a body that throws a 65-yard bomb with ease, the result is something special. After the workout, those in attendance didn't rush out the doors or return to business calls immediately. They lingered. They talked. Some asked for film from the session to rewatch it. A few even compared what they'd seen to the private workouts of elite quarterbacks in the past decade. The name that came up more than once was Joe Burrow, not because of identical play style, but because of the readiness, the completeness, the sense that this kid wasn't walking into the NFL looking to survive. He was preparing to win. It also became clear that the doubts some teams had held during the draft process weren't about talent. They were about context. Many had questioned the competition Sanders faced in college, or whether his numbers were inflated by scheme. But what this workout proved was that Shedeur could function at NFL speed, against NFL-caliber defenders, and under NFL-style pressure. Not in theory. In fact, the buzz following the workout didn't take long to ripple through the league. Within 48 hours, whispers emerged about front offices reviewing their evaluations. Teams that had spent late-round picks on developmental quarterbacks were now wondering if they'd missed a generational opportunity. The Raiders were reportedly making quiet inquiries. The Giants, who had invested in a bridge quarterback, were said to be watching closely. Even a few surprise contenders, teams with aging starters or shaky backups, were circling the waters, trying to figure out how to bring Shedeur in for another look. For Shedeur himself, the response didn't seem to change much. He remained grounded, working with his personal QB coach the next day on the small mistakes from the session. The rep he overthrew, the one audible he made a second too late. There's a quiet intensity in him that doesn't spike with praise or plummet with criticism. He absorbs it, learns from it, and continues forward. That quality, emotional equilibrium, is perhaps his most underrated trait, and it's one that NFL coaches crave in a leader. The fact that his father is Deion Sanders adds another dimension to the narrative. Some assume that Shedeur had everything handed to him. But what becomes clear the more you observe him is that he carries the weight of expectation like armor. It doesn't burden him. It shields him. It fuels him to meet the moment, to exceed what others believe is possible for someone in his position. That motivation, combined with elite training, creates something potent. At a time when so many teams are struggling to find their next franchise quarterback, Shedeur Sanders might have just reminded them that stars don't always shine brightest during the college football playoffs or in the first round of the draft. Sometimes, greatness is revealed under pressure. In a warehouse-turned-training ground in Miami, surrounded by silence, intensity, and a quiet hum of realization spreading across a league that had misjudged him. As the days pass and the tape circulates among front offices, the question now isn't whether Shedeur will get a chance. It's which team will be smart enough and bold enough to give it to him first. Because if his workout was any indicator, that team isn't just getting a quarterback. They're getting a leader, a technician, and potentially the future of their franchise. The last throw of the workout session was a deep-in route across the field, hitting the receiver in stride just before he stepped out of bounds. It was a kind of throw that defines careers in the NFL, the kind you make in January, not July. As the receiver jogged back, one scout watching from behind the sideline leaned over to another and said, "That's not a workout rep. That's a Sunday throw." The buzz generated by Shedeur Sanders' private workout continued to ripple well beyond the field where it all took place. It followed scouts onto their flights back to team headquarters, filled the airwaves of football talk shows, and found its way into draft war rooms that thought they had already closed the book on quarterback evaluations. It wasn't just what Sanders did. It was how unmistakably real it felt. There were no gimmicks, no carefully choreographed moments designed to manufacture highlight reels. Just a quarterback operating on a different level than anyone expected from a so-called fifth-round prospect. Some of the older scouts couldn't help but reminisce about the last time they saw a workout that felt this authentic. They talked about Andrew Luck's clean mechanics and control, about Deshaun Watson's poise at Clemson, but what they kept circling back to with Shedeur was the adaptability, the ability to change gears mid-drill, to respond to unplanned shifts in coverage, to not just run through a script, but improve upon it in real time. That kind of responsiveness, that kind of football intellect doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from obsession, from years of preparation most fans will never see. There's a growing sense now that Shedeur might have been hidden in plain sight. Everyone saw the numbers. They watched the games. But in a league where production is often dismissed if it doesn't come against SEC speed, Sanders' brilliance had been brushed off by some decision-makers as a product of system or competition. The workout shattered that narrative. These weren't Big Sky defenders he was shredding in Miami. These were ex-NFL players, guys who'd spent Sundays chasing quarterbacks into nightmares. And Sanders made it look like just another day at practice. It wasn't lost on anyone how well he communicated with the team around him, either. In between sets, he huddled with the receivers, not to lecture, but to listen. He asked about timing, about leverage, about how they felt the play could be refined. He talked to the linemen running simulations protection, learning how they saw the blitz and adjusting accordingly. He even spoke with defenders after certain reps, asking how they disguised their pre-snap look and whether he missed any cues. That level of humility mixed with competitive fire is rare. Usually, quarterbacks show one or the other. Shedeur seemed to balance both without breaking stride. Back at team headquarters across the league, decision-makers began facing a dilemma. The tape was one thing, the workout another, but the sudden rush of momentum from scouts and player personnel directors demanding a second look, now that was unignorable. Some GMs had already begun coordinating a follow-up session. Others were quietly scheduling interviews, trying to get a read on the man behind performance. Was he really this sharp all the time? Was this the norm or an outlier? The answer, for those who knew him best, was simple. This was who he had always been. What most people didn't realize was just how obsessed Shedeur was with the process. Film sessions that went long into the night, texting coaches about formations at 1 a.m., running drills in the Florida Heat, not because anyone asked, but because he hadn't liked how one play felt in walk-throughs. This was preparation honed over years, not months. His father may be Dion, but Shedeur wasn't relying on name. He was building a legacy of his own. That legacy, as it turns out, might be defined not by highlight tapes, but by moments like these, private workouts where the stakes are unspoken but immense, where one misread can validate a scout's doubts, and one perfect throw can make a team rethink its entire draft board. And Shedeur? He stacked perfect throws for hours. If there was a misstep, it was brief and immediately corrected. If there was tension, it never showed. He moved through the pressure with the kind of ease that makes people lean forward and ask, "Are we watching something rare here?" By the end of the session, no one was talking about what round he was drafted in. They were talking about ceiling, about starter potential, about whether he might be ready not next season. But now, the idea that Sanders might need a year or two on the bench was beginning to sound outdated. Teams that had taken quarterbacks earlier in the draft were suddenly sweating, not because of what they had, but because of what they might have passed on. And then there was a public reaction, as clips leaked online. Spirals thrown into impossibly tight windows, sideline fades that dropped in with inch-perfect placement. Fans started asking questions too. Why did this guy fall so far? Why weren't we talking about him more? What did everyone miss? That question, what did we miss, hung in the air for days after the workout. And for some teams, it became a call to action. This wasn't just about correcting a misjudged player evaluation. It was about staying ahead of a wave that looked inevitable. Because if Shedeur Sanders performs like this when the lights come on, if he carries this level of command and execution into preseason, or, dare anyone say it, an actual NFL game, then the conversation changes. Then we're not talking about draft steals. We're talking about franchise-altering talent that slipped through the cracks. What happens next is still unwritten. The NFL is littered with stories of potential unfulfilled, of workouts that dazzled but never translated. But this feels different. There's a gravity to what Shedeur did in Miami. A sense that, for once, a player exceeded the hype instead of just chasing it. If the league is paying attention, and there's no doubt it is, then the clock is already ticking. Because the team that acts first, the one that sees not what Shedeur has been but what he could be, just might end up with the biggest win of the draft cycle. And Shedeur? He's already preparing for the next session. Not for validation, but because that's what he does. That's who he is. The future is coming, and it has number 14 written all over it.